Good morning, Rock and Roll Shakespeareans. This is Deanne coming to you in this mediated format, in this particular technological medium, for a few reasons. And I'm going to save the third one for a kind of surprise at the end of this. But the first one is a very practical reason, and it is that I was thinking through these things as I was walking home and didn't want my ability to articulate the thoughts to diminish after I had a good night's sleep tomorrow morning. The second reason is less practical and more emotional, and it is that I think many of us get a little kick in the morning from getting to see these little creatures who sadly I cannot bring with me to school in the morning. Sad unless you have a dog allergy, which is unfortunate, but I understand. So there you go. There's your little bit of a boost in the brain chemicals that make you feel good in the morning. What I am bringing to you this morning is hopefully an extension of the conversation that we started on Monday when we were talking about two different models for textual relations. The kind of self-contained model that Rupa and Nicole have been kind of proponents of in their post and in class, and then the more intertextual model. We talked through the histories of those a little bit, and J.R. brought up that those models are important because they have to do with how kind of strong or weak we might see a text as being. In other words, as I was taking it, they have to do with how we value text, right? What would, if you believe that a text is self-contained, that ultimately it doesn't rely on other text for signification, then you might look for, in a text that you value, things like aesthetics, we discussed, sound, particular innovations in style, and I think innovation is crucial there. Originality and independence are also things we talked about. You might also value timelessness. Now, conversely, when we discussed intertextuality, we talked about how a connection to past texts might be something one would value. If you think that all meaning comes from the relationship between texts in the first place, the ones that draw on and emphasize those relationships the most perhaps have the deepest meaning and help to enhance that. So there's a kind of time-situatedness as opposed to timelessness. And there is also a kind of political potential in text with an intertextuality model. You're sort of acknowledging that the way that we view one text influences or excludes or highlights another. I wanted to connect that discussion with a discussion that we had in the past, where I asked about the questioning the questions in the class, the meta question discussion, where Nicole right away said, in response to the question, why might it matter what our idea about the relationship between texts is? She said, well, this can reflect cultural meanings or historical meanings. So I think it's especially important to think about that the way we see text relating, which is very much connected to what we value in texts, is also the way that we see ourselves relating to the past, right? And how much value we place on the past. It's an important question, extremely loud and incredibly close, right? And it's also the way that we see ourselves relating to others, however we might define those others, right? People of other gender, other culture, other sexual orientation, right? So what do we value in that particular situation? And so, as you're working through this paper, as you're trying to come up with a model or articulate an aspect of a model or problematize a model, I want you to be thinking about that model's extension to not just text and not just other media too, like songs, right? But also to larger things like interpersonal relations, intertemporal relations. And that brings me to the third reason why I'm coming to you in this particular medium. Excuse me. During the Renaissance, I'm fine. It's okay. During the Renaissance, there were a lot of anxieties about the printing press. You see all these kinds of disclaimers at the beginnings of books, where authors would kind of liken their books to bastard children running around. And so they felt a connection to them, but they also felt somehow like this could, be a blight against their name or something. And so there were a lot of worries about how these texts were going to be disconnected from the handwriting, the kind of bodily function of their authors. And we have the same thing going on with the digital revolution and the information age. What will survive? What will we value, right? How do we see things like this video relating to things like an entry on a Wikipedia page, or a digital copy of the Declaration of Independence, right? Do we think that they all need to coexist together, or do we think that we need to make some kind of value judgments about which ones should and can stand more alone? And so I'm coming to you in this medium to foreground that questions of textual relations are questions about what survives in the digital age. And to ask you to think about really the use and the function and the accuracy of your model in your paper, or at least the aspect of the model that you discuss. So without further ado, we'll get into those thesis statement workshops by first addressing the question, what to you is the difference between interpretation and observation, right? So your model is supposed to help you interpret a text, develop an interpretation of a text. So what is the difference between observing something about a text and coming up with an observation about it? All right. Thanks. Say bye, Jack. Say bye. Oh, we're going down.